Today's story is about a lawyer. He's a well-known lawyer in the community, and he had a son who followed along his father's footsteps. And after he graduated law school, passed the bar, he came back to his hometown and started in practice with his father. He was really excited, but he felt this big burden because he knew he was in quite a large shadow. And so he really wanted to prove himself well. Even that first day, the son came in his father's office that first day, and boy, he was so excited. And he said, "Daddy, do you remember that Smith case?" Father said, "Yeah, son, I remember that. You remember that was the case that you said we could never settle. We've been working on that case for years." Father said, "Uh-huh. Daddy, I settled that case in one day, and I saved our clients thousands of dollars." Father's face dropped. He looked back up and he kind of scolded his son. He said, "Son, I didn't tell you that that case couldn't be solved. I said it would be difficult to solve." And son, did it ever catch you that all those times we were working on that, we were charging those people by the hour? Sometimes good or bad, we learn things with time. I'm reminded of this quote. This is from William Griffin. He said, "It's what you learn after you know it all that counts." It's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And I think about that. I think about the lessons that we learn in life, because life really is a lifelong process of learning, right? I think about the things that we learn about the Bible. Those of you that have read the Bible year after year after year, I think you would be the first ones in line to say that the more we read, the more we learn. The more we read, actually, it's the more that we will admit that we don't know. And so we keep reading. Particularly, though, and this leads into our topic for today, is that one of the things that I've learned recently is that for all the knowledge that I have about the church, the Bible knowledge of the structure of the church, but particularly the relationship aspect of the church. You know, the Bible talks about loving one another and all those one another passages, and there are times where you think, "Boy, I've got a handle on this." But there are conversations that we can have that just remind us that we still have a lot yet to learn. And that's kind of where I have been lately. It's something that's taken place in my life, but James has also had similar experiences of just reminders that we still have a lot to learn about church.
Today, Johnny and I put this together because we wanted to speak to our church family. We had something that's on our heart that we want to share. Before we do that, we want to also welcome our visitors that may be here today. And we want you to know, first and foremost, that you are our special guest. And we ask that you stay around afterwards for a little bit and let us get to know you. If you hear something today and you're visiting and you can carry this back and share it with your church family, great. We also want you to know that if you're here today and you don't have a church family, we would love for you to be a part of our wonderful family here. Also, as Johnny had just announced a while ago, we will be eating following this, so we'll try to get done as quickly as possible. And when we get done and we eat, we want to invite our family and our special guests to join us. And if it's this, "Well, I can't because I didn't bring anything," that's not a good excuse. There's plenty for everybody. And so we ask that you all stay.
And if James has to do without a meal, it won't hurt him any either, son.
I'll go last. I'll start with the desserts. How about that? What led up to today? Several months ago, I have no idea what happened, but several months ago, I began to think about my relationships. And I began to think about the really poor job I've done with relationships. in my life. I feel like I could have done a better job. In thinking about that and pondering that and beginning to study on that, I met someone that used to be a member of this church. And I got an opportunity. I would say that God put us together. And I got an opportunity to talk to this person. And I found out that this person is not here today, and it's because of relationships. They left and went somewhere else because they were looking for relationships. Nothing necessarily bad about our church, but they found some friendships where they go now. And that got me to thinking, and so I began to reach out to other members people that used to be members of this church. I reached out to those people, and I even reached out to visitors that have come through these doors one time or multiple times, and they're no longer here today. And I asked them this question in our conversation. I said, what do you need? What do you need? I even carried this so far as to going out, and because I'm an extrovert and I can talk to anybody, God even gave me opportunities to speak to people in the community. And I began to ask people in the community that have no association with this church, and some that are total strangers. And I'd ask them, what do you need? And it was astounding to hear the response, because it came rather quickly. And the response is that the people are looking for relationships. And what was even better than that is I didn't even have to prompt them and say, what are you looking for in a relationship? Because while they were going, they just continued to tell me. Some told me that they're looking for a friendship. Some said that they're looking for somebody to hang out with. They're looking for someone to share a meal with. These are in various other things that people said they were looking for in a relationship. So I didn't know what to do with all this. This was a little overwhelming. So I came back and sat down with Johnny and just kind of dumped it on Johnny and said, Johnny, this is what I found out. There's a need out there. There's a need about relationships. And Johnny was kind of grinning, and he says, I get it. And he also had been talking to some person or persons and also he said in his conversation with them, there was an apparent need for this relationships. Johnny used the word, it's almost as if some of these people we met are starving or craving for relationships. So we decided to put this together today, and not just today, but this month is, if you will, Relationship September. And really what today is just to expose this need for relationships. We want you to take from here that relationships are, they're more than surface level. We want you to get out of this today that these relationships, we want to be reminded that they require work and they require effort. Johnny, tell us about the importance of relationships.
Relationships are real important. We've got a Bible verse we want to keep before you, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I think about how busy we are. In the midst of us wanting these relationships, if we were to ask the majority of people, especially my age and younger today, if we were to ask, hey, how is life going? What's the first thing that people are going to say? I'm so busy. It's children's games here, it's birthday parties there, but even for my age and up, you have doctor's appointments. My mom's calendar is filled day after day each week with various doctor's appointments. And for her, it involves going a distance that's about from Camden to El Dorado. So there are a lot of things that just keep us busy. Now, the problem with all of our busyness is it seems like that's the thing, church is what loses out. All right? We have things going on every weekend. And so when I ask someone if they're going to be here Sunday, what even I as your preacher will get, well, if I don't have anything else to do, if I'm not going out of town, and if I'm not too tired, and if the kids aren't sick, and the list goes on, well, I'll be there. But what that also typically means in church is I will slide in right in the opening song, and as soon as the last amen is said, we've got to hurry out the door because there's always something to do. And the problem with that is it is a very difficult thing to make relationships in the church if our only exposure to people is looking at the back of their heads. And if we only limit our time to make friendships in the church to the time in this room, all we'll do is look at the back of others' heads. Now, it's interesting, there's a lot of studies about church and relationships. One of the ones that James found, he shared with me, is that people need to meet at least 6 different people when they come together for a time of worship in order to make or at least be exposed to that person that could be a friend. And I would imagine most of the time that we make a statement like that, all of us are running our list right now, we're going, how many people talked to me today? Oh, only 5 talked to me today. The point today is not that. Our question today is this: if it takes 6 people to expose us to an opportunity to make a relationship, were you one of the 6 people to talk to someone that you could provide that relationship that he or she needs right now? Because we are all craving these relationships. We are, different ones of us at different seasons go through difficult times, and we need someone there to help us through those times. And if we don't meet those right people, then we're going to miss that link. And that person will walk out and they'll say, church let me down. And that's a lot of what we're finding in some of the people that are leaving and not coming back, is that there were special seasons in their lives when there were special things that were going on, and church missed an opportunity to be church to that person. And so it is extremely important that we look. Now, the Bible is trying to talk a lot about relationships. I told you last Sunday that we will go through a lot of different Bible verses in the month. Today, though, it's one. We can look at the importance of the first need God saw in man was not good for man to be alone. You can talk about the different examples of friendships, the one another passages in the Bible, but today we're going to focus on one verse.
If you were to walk away today with what was the objective today? When Johnny and I have spent time studying together and praying together over this lesson today, what comes up in our prayers is igniting a fire. And that's what we want to do today. We want to reignite a fire in each one of us about the need and the desire for a relationship. We want you to leave here today with a mission, and that is that you want to connect or reconnect with someone here in this family. Or reconnect or connect with a visitor that may be here today. And we want you to do that both here in this worship service, but also intentionally outside of this building as well. Johnny talked about the scriptures and the sheer volume of it. I was quite overwhelmed in my study. When Johnny and I were putting this together, Johnny had his list of scriptures that Johnny wanted to we thought we would use today. I came with my list of scriptures. The ironic thing is that a lot of our scriptures weren't even the same. The Bible, from Genesis to Revelation, talks at such great length about relationships, the lessons that can be learned and the stories that we read, the commands for relationships that we find in the Bible. But as Johnny stated, we wanted to leave you today with one verse. This verse we kept coming back to is a verse that Austin read this morning in Proverbs 19:22. And it's Solomon writes, he says, "What is desired in a man is steadfast love. A poor man is better than a liar." It's that first part of this verse that we really want to focus on. What man desires is this steadfast love. That word, we have come back, and Johnny will probably use this. I don't want to steal his thunder here, but there's a richness to this verse, to this particular word, steadfast. We trying to translate that in the English language, we've thrown all kinds of words out there because it is such a deep, such a rich word that we're trying to capture everything that it says. The translation that I like for this is radical loyalty. But if you go back and you simply look at this verse, what Solomon is writing here, he said there's a desire inside each one of us. And it's not a desire to live alone. It's a desire for relationships. And it's not just a surface relationship, it's a desire to be radically loyal to each other. That's pretty awesome. That reminds me, that's how God created us. Johnny will give us the preacher side of it. He'll tell you about the Hebrew word for it.
James is reading, I believe, out of the English Standard Version. And one of the things that I love about our church is how we use different translations. On Wednesday nights especially, we are able to use that for our advantage of making sure that we get a real good picture of what that verse is saying. The New International Version puts that verse this way: what a person desires is unfailing love. Again, I like that statement. What a person desires is unfailing love. Better to be poor than a liar. Now, the reason that a lot of our translations use such different words points back to the Hebrew word here. And I'll be the first to admit I don't know a lot about the Hebrew language, but I do know something about this word. The word here is hesed. It actually is more of a chesed, but I don't do real well with that. So if you'll just work with me, hesed is really the word. Now, when you look at that one word, it's H-E-S-E-D, and it will mean such various things as kindness, love, steadfast love, loyalty, favor, devotion, and mercy. That's a lot of English words to try to capture the beauty of one Hebrew love. But it says in Scripture, what a person desires is that kind of love, that steadfast love, that loyal love. What is great to see, if you look in the book of Numbers particularly, Numbers 14, when Moses is speaking to God and he's reminding God about the love that God has for his people, he talks about the fact that you are slow to anger, abounding in love. The word there is hesed. It is the same word that describes God's love for us. And what Solomon says in Scripture is what we desire in our relationships with one another is the same type of love that God has shown to us. Now that sets the standard pretty high though, doesn't it? But that's what we are looking for in one another. Now I want to ask this: how strong would our church be if we made it our goal to memorize this love, this verse, and to try to fulfill that love in our relationships with one another? That when we talked about our love for one another, and whether it is words like kindness, love, but steadfast love, loyalty, favor, devotion, mercy. Can you imagine how strong our church family would be? Now, I know that within this family we have relationships like that, but what if that became the prevailing theme, the term that people would use when they talked about, and we use this statement, but what if we were described as a church that loves one another, but this is the type of love that we're talking about? Now all of a sudden we have raised the standard and we have become a church that is a light on a hill that others can look at. Now here's the deal. It's not easy. And for us to think that we can quote one verse today, we get that, we go, and everything is well, this is the church we're going to be, case settled. It's not that easy. And requires a starting point and a very patient process to move forward, to have that kind of relationship with one another, a relationship that is based on steadfast love and radical loyalty. So, the question we want to ask as we leave today, we're going to go through just a couple of highlights, but it's real simple, is where do we start in trying to develop those kind of relationships?
Yeah, we're going to introduce that today. As we put this together, we wanted to leave you with 3 practical points that you can take out of this. You can take this verse with you, and you can apply it to these 3 points today. But these 3 points are very important, and we can't do justice to it just at this time. And so we'll introduce those today. But Johnny will unpack each one of these over the next 3 weeks. This is where the series came from. Be Church came from these 3 points. And I will echo what Johnny says, because as I stand here before you, remember I told you that I haven't been real happy about the way I've handled relationships before. So as we look at these 3 points, these are difficult. These are difficult for me. But as Johnny said, these are a start. The first one that we want to look at is we want to talk about be intentional. Be intentional. You could put in a parentheses out beside that, and it would be to make an effort. I, for a long time, thought that if I said, "Hi, how are you?" or "How's the weather today?" that I had done something. It really didn't leave you with much. And that's what we look at today. We want to go beyond that. We want to go beyond the "Hi, how are you?" or "How's the weather today?" To be intentional means that we go further and we go deeper than that. When we look at this word, be intentional, every time that we meet someone, every encounter that we have with someone, and this idea of a relationship, we need to leave others better than we found them. That's part of this, to be intentional. A "Hi, how are you?" that doesn't get it. We got to go further than that. And so, as we look at this idea of leaving others better than we found them, when you're having a conversation with someone, have it in such a way that you can leave that conversation and maybe you have something that you can pray with or pray for that person. Maybe there's a need that comes up in that conversation, and you can go home and you can pray for that person. Maybe you can think about the conversation you're having and find a way in that conversation to leave that person encouraged. But nevertheless, when we meet someone, we need to be willing to leave them better than we found them. The other one is, just as we started off this, is that when we intentionally have a conversation with someone, we need to ask that question, what do you need? What do you need? What are your needs right now? And be prepared. As I thought about this one, I thought about 2 examples. One, I visited with a man that had hernia surgery, and he was at home recuperating. And there had been a lot of people that had come in and out of his house. And I waited several days for him to feel better and knew that there were people coming in and out. So I went to see him one day, and he welcomed me in, and we had a good conversation, but I just couldn't help but feel a little strange in his house because it was dark. It was darker than normal, and I just didn't understand. But anyway, a little uncomfortable, but made it through the visit, and I asked him this question. I said, "Is there anything you need? Anything I can do for you?" And he just looked at me and he said, are you serious? And I said, well, sure. I said, what do you need? He said, well, I sure could use somebody to change my light bulbs because I'm sitting here in the dark because I got no lights. And all these people had come in and out, and they had done what we all do. We've all said, we hope you get to feeling better soon. We're sorry you're going through this. We ask that you get better quickly, but nobody asked what he needed. I also did that with an elderly woman that I visited, and when I left there, I asked her what she needed. And when I left that day, I had changed a number of light bulbs, and I even fixed a toilet that wouldn't flush. So be prepared when you ask that question, but that's part about being intentional. Johnny, talk to us about the next one.
We need to be intentional, but we also need to be available. Remember, one of the translations we talked about, what a person desires is that loyalty. It's a radical loyalty, and that can be summed up as simple as be here and be there. I've had a lot of people over the years. I remember teaching teen classes, and even as a teen, we would ask our teacher, now what does the Bible say about being to church on Sunday night? Where can you quote that to me? What about Wednesday? Can you tell me where I have to be there for that? And I think, again, the older I get, the more I'm learning. And I really think I'm asking the wrong question. When I ask that question, often I ask it, I need to be here for me. But when we think about this idea that what a person desires is steadfast love or radical loyalty, what I'm going to suggest to you is the fact that your presence here may be what somebody else needs. If someone comes in with a burden on their heart and they're looking for someone that will listen, that will pray, or perhaps even will help, if I'm not here, I can't help. And so it's important then in our relationships with one another, not just that I'm scooting and sliding in and slipping out, but I want to take time to talk because, again, one of the things that I'm listening for is I'm listening as in our conversations. How can I leave you better than I found you? As I'm listening to you, I'm asking this question, what is it that I need to pray about as far as you are concerned? But I'm also going to have opportunity a lot of times to think of just real practical ways that people need help. And I need to be here to be that in kind of encouragement to someone. So I need to be here, but I also need to be there. By the way, that being here, I think that's why it's important. Hebrews 10:24 and 25. He talks about encouraging one another. I can't encourage others if I'm not here. Be there. Church, we don't need to miss important events and seasons in people's lives. And you can start at birth and you can go all the way to death. And anytime we think of an important event in someone's life, if someone has given birth to a child, Abby's birthday was yesterday, and I'm always reminded on our birthday of the people that came by the hospital that were the first ones to see her, that in those days. Now, when Andy was born, that was particularly important because all of that didn't go well, and he ended up in NICU. And so those people that came by then were huge supporters and encouragement for us. When you have a loved one that in your family that's getting married, perhaps a son or a daughter, we need to be there for that kind of support and encouragement. Time in a hospital, whether it's a season in rehab or whether it's a time of illness, we need to be there for people. That's a card, that's a call, that's a visit, but we need to be there for people. It is extremely important when we think about being available, of being here and being there. Keeping before us this idea that what a person desires is unfailing love.
Be intentional, be available. Those are challenging. But this last one is be vulnerable. You can put parentheses out beside that. That's willing to let others into our world. I think it's the problem that I'm seeing is because our relationships aren't as deep as they need to be. But I find it interesting in these conversations and this time that I've spent talking to people that we want to be such a private people. We want to keep it all to ourselves. I've actually here recently, in trying to work on this idea of relationship, know somebody that that needs a hug, that needs a prayer, and been told, no, don't do that. Don't upset them. No, they want to be private about this. And that's not what it's about, this radical loyalty. It's about letting others in. Being vulnerable, so many times we see that, when you look at the definition of that, that means to be weak. And that's not what this is about. God didn't design us. He didn't design this idea of relationships for us to carry our burdens on this solo mission. He designed us so that we would carry these burdens together. And we need to learn to be vulnerable. I learned this lesson just last week. Again, I wish you could have been with me over the past few months and been with Johnny, because in this study, God has put people, God has put circumstances in our way that has allowed us to see what we've been studying and been able to put some of these things that we've been learning into practice even before we come up here today. But I got an opportunity. I'm not a big person that text, okay? If you send me ask my wife. I don't text very well. I may or may not respond. But that's what life is today. Everybody likes to text. And what I've done over the last few months, I've actually been texting more. I probably have calluses on my thumbs where I'm trying to do better. Last week there's an individual that I know that life has really been beating them up. But I haven't reached out to that person. I've really kind of been asking other people about them. I didn't want to get involved in their life, and really their life and mine, we really don't even cross paths. I really haven't had that opportunity to find that person. But because of this study and what we've been going through last week while I was sitting in my office, I kept thinking about this person, and so I got their number and I sent them a text. I really didn't know what to do. I didn't really feel like I was prying or that I was invading or anything, and so I sent them a text and told them I was thinking of them. And then a couple of people walked in my office and it was time for a meeting. So as I'm having this meeting, all of a sudden my phone just starts dinging and dinging and dinging and dinging some more. And I hurried through that meeting and got through it, and I opened my phone up, and this individual was very glad to hear from me. And what I had thought had been going on for a series of months has actually been going on for over 2 years. This person has quit their job. They have retreated into their home. And through our little texts and a time together, I got an opportunity to talk to them about this idea of relationships. And I told them, I said, if you had just reached out to me, if you had just let me know just how serious this was, I could have prayed more specific. I could have helped you carry this burden. They responded with this. They said, I do understand that about relationships. For one, we don't want to bother others. Then some of us think we can fix everything by ourselves, which is the furthest from the truth. That's this idea of being vulnerable. We need to be there for each other. But I can't be there for you, I can't love on you if you don't let me in. And we're talking about when life deals us a bad hand, but also, as Johnny mentioned, about the good things. We want to be there to celebrate. But you need to let us in for those moments where we can celebrate with you. We need to work on our relationships with each other. We need to be intentional. When we're intentional, we need to be available. And we need to be vulnerable. This passage that we read today, the desire in man is this radical loyalty. That's a verse that we need to take with us. But I want you to take this with you as well. When you leave here today, when you leave this place today, take this with you. Somewhere it's here in my notes. I want to make sure I read it right, so I lost it. We need to be intentional in our conversations. Making ourselves available when someone's willing to be vulnerable. We need to be intentional in our conversations. Making ourselves available when someone is willing to be vulnerable.
Wow. I hope that each of you will look in your Bible. If you underline, underline it. Highlight it, highlight it. If you need to write it on a card, put it on your bathroom mirror. But keep this verse before you. Again, whatever the translation may be, mine is, what a person desires is unfailing love. And we need to keep that before us. Real quickly, I want to just mention this quote. This is Maya Angelou that says, "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. I think about this verse, what a person desires is unfailing love. That is present tense. Some of us, I fear, are living in past tense. I can talk about all the friends that I have made, whether it was friends in the youth group or friends in the college group or friends in another season of life. Steve could probably tell you about some great friendships he had during the time that he lived in Dallas, or different ones of us could do that. Others of you have talked about those friends in the past that you've had that you shared at least one meal a day with, and those are great. Those are great memories. Those are great blessings. But this verse reminds us of a present need. What a person desires is unfailing love. It is a present need. And so that's why I look at that and I think about what Maya Angelou said, that one of the greatest agonies is bearing an untold story inside you. What would happen, church, if I really believe that some of our best stories are yet to be written? Now, some of you, you've had great friendships over the years, and those are ones you don't replace, but what if there's another chapter to be written? What if there's another opportunity for another friend? Maybe in this auditorium. It may be a person that's not here today. It may be a person that God will put in our midst in the days and weeks ahead. But what if there are still great friendships to be made? Because a lot of us we still have a lot to give. We also, though, have that desire because it is a present need. As we close, I remind you that this desire we have in us is for a love that God has already shown for us. And so perhaps having experienced that and coming to terms with that love, you can't help but think, I need to respond to that love by making Jesus the Lord of my life. That's the importance of being baptized into Christ, of becoming part of a church family where our goal as a church is to develop the relationships with one another that live up to the promise of filling that need for steadfast love, for that radical loyalty. It may be this morning you've got a need in your life, something specifically that's ahead. Now, a lot of those are already on our prayer list, so understand a lot of people have been vulnerable to share with us the needs in our life. Hold true to that. Pray for them, but talk to them. Look for an opportunity to serve and to be a blessing to them. But we're going to close this morning with a song, a great song to remind us of the importance of why we're here and what the future can hold for us. So if we can help you in any way, we invite you to come now. Let's stand and sing.